everyone, it's Maddie.
And me, and today we're going to be talking about Rose Rivers by Jacqueline Wilson.
This was our book club pick for June, and the July pick is Katie, so if you want to read that with us in July, then start reading now.
Rose Rivers is about a girl who's grown up in an upper-class family, and she desperately wants to go to school, but it's only her twin brother who's obviously allowed to go. Her father is an artist, and she wants to follow in his footsteps, but she's not good at the traditional drawings. She does cartoons, and then her father acquires an apprentice called Paris, and Rose falls in love with him.
Rose also has lots of siblings, and one of them, Beth, has some kind of disability, so she has her own carer, and a lot of the plot is also dedicated to Rose trying to fight for Beth's corner as she feels she's being mistreated.
Our favourite bit of Rose Rivers has to be the first 50 pages, when you're immediately getting to know Rose. She felt like a character that we were going to love.
We're always really impressed with Jacqueline Wilson's historical novels because she sets up the atmosphere so well. The dialogue and the environments are really well researched, so you feel grounded in the period.
This is a companion novel to Clover Moon, another Victorian child, that's set in the same world as Hetty Feather. And this is sort of a sequel that could have been from Clover's perspective because she does pop up halfway through.
Clover is employed as a nursery maid, particularly for Beth, and it's really nice to see their friendship develop between Clover and Rose because they come from two different backgrounds, and Rose has a lot of sympathy for those that are lower class.
And obviously this is a family of artists, and Clover has a special talent herself. So the divide is very apparent of those that get opportunities and those that don't. Not only is it class-based, but gender-based as well in the distinction between Rose and her brother Rupert.
Another thing we really liked was art as a prominent hobby, because normally the fallback is writing or some kind of journalism. But the thing with Rose is, even though she has this hobby of art, she doesn't really pursue it very much actually in the book.
No,
and that was
true.
One of our issues. Like, she realises that she could be better, but when she practices the wrong thing, not what she loves to do. So it feels kind of stagnant, but anyway, it's just nice to see a character with a hobby that's different from writing.
And finally, Rose Rivers surprises with a romance plot, as we've gestured to.
So Rose is 13 in this book, which is quite old for a Jackie heroine, especially because Clover Moon, I think, is meant to be 11, and Hetty is the same when at the start of her series. So it was really nice to see romance as a thread, because that seems like something that as characters mature would come into their lives more. So that was a really different spin to it.
So now onto our discussion. First of all, we wanted to think a little bit about how class works in the novel. We have Clover and Rose. And they're from very different backgrounds, and obviously school is a huge thing.
What we really enjoyed about this book adding to Clover Moon is that you got two opposite sides of the spectrum, and so it's kind of subliminally educating her readers about what women's lives were like and what different opportunities could do to how you could thrive.
Next is, how is Rose similar to previous Jackie characters, but also how is she different? Obviously, all of Jackie's characters have some sort of discomfort about the situation that they're living in. They want to push forward and do something else.
If this story was made into a trilogy with Clover Moon acting as the first book, who would you like to see as the protagonist of the third? Because I think it would work really well if it was like a joint perspective thing, so then it became Clover and Rose, rather than introducing another character, because I'm not really sure what that would add, unless they were like smack dab in the middle of the two.
Yeah.
It's so black and white back then, you were either poor or rich, so you know, I think it would be really interesting if we got to see the girls interact a little bit more at the end of the book. And big spoiler warning if you haven't read it, but Rose actually does get to go to school as part of a punishment for something that she did. You were kind of thinking about whether there could be a sequel of Rose going to school and how interesting that would be.
The plot of Rose Rivers, everything that happens there, should have been Clover's story and Rose be a secondary character, so that Rose Rivers' story would follow her into boarding school, because the school environment isn't one we've seen in Jackie's historical books. Obviously you have the Foundling Hospital from Hetty Feather, which will have a similar vibe, I assume.
But again, that's another like low class, high class thing.
Yeah, and I think because she's 13, whereas Hetty in the Foundling Hospital was like 8, it is going to be a very different experience. What did you think of Beth's story? It's definitely the emotional core, and Rose keeps returning to it. We have to admit that we found some of these scenes rather repetitive, because it's not until Clover arrives and the rest of the plot starts really coming to a head that you learn more about what's actually going on with Beth.
Something that didn't sit well with us is that disability was posed as a burden to this family, and that's probably something to do with the 18th century because we had different views back then, obviously. A positive was that Rose was fighting against that and always saying that Beth was a valued member of their family, that she deserved exactly the same things as the other children, even though she was being taken away from the table or not given presents or not taken out. So I thought it was fascinating how disability was shown without being like really overt about what was the issue.
Another interesting question is how much sympathy you can really have for Rose as a character when she comes from an upper class background and has a relatively easy childhood, especially when you have characters like Clover and Beth as juxtaposition. Can you really feel sorry for her that in the end she actually gets what she always wanted, even though it might not have come about in the perfect way? Hetty Feather does appear in Rose Rivers as well for a tiny cameo, and I think if we were going to go into this world again, I would like a short story featuring all three of them.
There was definitely a lot of potential with Rose's character to be very different from Hetty and Clover.
She wasn't a girl where Clover came into her life and then she was schooled about the injustices of the class system. She was someone that already had it in her head that things were unfair and she wanted to make some changes. And I think that meant that character development or character growth was a little bit lacking for Rose herself.
Yeah, they had nowhere to go because she's basically the same as she is at the beginning, except she gets to go to school, but the consequences of her going there are very different to what she first imagined. I think in the end we're going to give this one a 3-star rating because it was really enjoyable, but I think Hetty will always have a stronger place in my heart as her favourite historical character.
Thank you everyone so much for watching our video on Rose Rivers. If you have any responses to the discussion questions that we posed or anything that you would like to add, please feel free to talk to us in the comments.
Thank you so much for watching and we'll see you next time.